In our video number 11, we are going to discuss a new topic, poverty under Indian economic development. Let's first learn the story of Asha and Palak. The story is given in NCERT textbook. So let's look at this story. Asha and Palak are two girls who share some similarity. The first similarity is that they are girls. The next is that they share their birthday. The date of birth is the same. That means they were born on the same day. However, there are differences too. Let's look at these differences. Now, parents. Asha's parents both are migrant laborers. So they keep shifting from one place to the other. And Palak's parents, father is a businessman and mother is a designer. Now, if you look at the story of their birth, Asha was born uh, on the construction site behind a tool shed. And her mother went to labor till the last minute. And Palak's, if you see, she was born in the best nursing home in the city. Asha's mother was all alone when Asha was born. But Palak, she had family and friends and they celebrated the occasion. Asha knew what hunger and deprivation were. But Palak could afford whatever she wanted. Or let's say Palak's parents could afford whatever Palak wanted. If you look at the opportunities, Asha did not go to school and she played with sticks and stones near her house or where her parents worked at the construction site. Whereas Palak went to a good school, she learned how to read and write. Now, if you look at the hobbies, both of them had hobbies. Asha loved to dance. Whenever she heard music, she used to start dancing. And she wished that someday she would perform on the stage. Whereas Palak loved painting. So she took lessons from the artist, a very famous artist, and later she joined a design school. Now, Palak had to take up work at the age of 12 and she had to help her mother and father earn a living. Whereas Palak became a painter when she grew up. Now, this was the story of Asha and Palak. Based on this story, we can learn many aspects of poverty. See, Asha's parents were laborers, they were migrant laborers, hence, they had no house of their own. So, they lived in kacha houses. Migrant laborers means that they had unstable employment. Then they were working at a construction site, which means that there was less care on the way to motherhood. See, she delivered this baby behind a tool shed on the construction site. And she was all alone. So there was risk of survival of the child. Whereas Palak was born in the best nursing home in the city. So all care was given to her. And she had people around her to celebrate, whereas she was all alone. And as soon as she finished giving birth to the baby, she wrapped her in the cloth and hung it to a tree as a swing or as a cradle. And she hurriedly went back to her work so that she doesn't lose that day's wage. Now, here she knew what hunger and deprivation were. That means that 2 meals a day is a difficult thing for them. Clean and safe drinking water and sanitation are a big problem. Then hunger shows that they could be malnourished, ill health, physically weak, susceptible to all kinds of situations. They had no access to electricity, there was no cooking fuel. Starvation and hunger are the two key features of poor households. Now, she could not go to school. This means that she lacked basic literacy skills and hence limited economic opportunities. Also, here we are talking about only Asha, whether she had brothers and sisters, we do not know. She is a girl child. So we can talk about gender inequality here. So there is gender inequality in employment, in education, and also in decision making in the family affairs. And see, she goes to work at 12, at the age of 12. This shows there is child labor, whereas that is not the case with Palak. So here we will see with the various aspects of poverty. We have urban poor and the rural poor. So we learned Asha's parents were migrant laborers. So the urban poor are the migrant laborers who have moved from the rural areas to the urban areas in search of alternative employment and livelihood. And these are the laborers who do a variety of casual jobs like construction workers, etc. And the self employed are those who sell a variety of things on the roadsides. You must have come across such people selling different varieties of things at the, uh, what do you call, traffic lights, isn't it? Then there are rural poor who are landless agricultural laborers. And they are the cultivators with very small land holdings. And they are engaged in a variety of non agricultural jobs. These also could be tenant cultivators or farmers with very small land holdings. Now, what decides this poverty? We talk of a poverty line that differentiates or that marks the difference between poor and the other class of the society. So, this is decided by the monetary value of the calorie intake. This monetary value, otherwise called MPCE or monthly per capita expenditure of the income. What is this? For rural areas, it is 816 rupees per person a month in the rural areas. And for the urban areas, it is 1000 rupees per person a month. That is the expenditure. And then if you look at the calorie intake, for rural areas, it is 2400 calories. And for urban areas, it is 2100 calories for a person. Now, why is this more in rural areas? Because these are agricultural laborers and they need more calorie intake for the hard work that they do. So, that is the difference between the calorie intake of the rural and the urban areas. Now, this graph shows the poverty line and how we categorize poverty. So, this dotted line shows us the poverty line, is the poverty line, and there are specific categories of the poor. There are always poor, usually poor, who are categorized under chronic poor. The churning and the occasionally poor are categorized as transient poor, and those who are never poor are the non poor. Now, who are these chronic poor? These are the people who are always poor and usually poor, but who may sometimes have a little money. Like, see here, when the graph goes up, a little money. For example, these casual workers, they are grouped together as the chronic poor. Then we have these transient poor, which includes the churning poor, who regularly move in and out of the poverty. See, look at this poverty line. They are sometimes up and sometimes down. These are small farmers and seasonal workers. Now you look at the occasionally poor. These are rich most of the time, but may sometimes have a patch of bad luck who, they fall below this poverty line. Then the non-poor, these are never poor. So they are always above the poverty line. How do we estimate poverty then? There are various methods. One is called the head count ratio. What is this head count ratio? It means number of poor that is estimated as a proportion of people who are below the poverty line. That means the percentage of people who live below the poverty line. So that is called as the head count ratio. Then the other methods of estimating poverty are the Sen index. The Amartya Sen, the noted Nobel Prize laureate, he developed this index called the Sen index. And then we have the poverty gap index, so called the PGI. Okay, the poverty gap index, and the other method is squared poverty gap, which we will learn in our higher classes. Then the official data of this estimation of poverty is provided by the Planning Commission of India, which is based on the consumption expenditure data collected by the National Sample Survey Organization. Now, why consumption expenditure and why not income? Income is not included because income does not define how much they spend. So, consumption expenditure is a much better way of estimating poverty. These graphs over here, the charts, they show the number of poor and their proportion to the population in India for the years 1973-2012. These will be present in your NCERT textbook. Now, if you look at these charts, in 1973 to 74, more than 320 million people were below the poverty line. In 2011-12, this number has come down to about 270 million. See, 270 million. In terms of proportion, in 1973-74, about 55% of the total population was below the poverty line. 55% below the poverty line. And it has fallen to 22% in 2011 and 12. In 1973-74, more than 80% of the poor resided in rural areas, and in this situation has not changed even in 2011-12. Okay. In 1990s, the absolute number of poor in rural areas has declined, whereas the absolute number of poor in the urban areas has increased marginally. The poverty ratio also declined continuously for both the urban and the rural areas. The gap between the absolute number of poor in rural urban areas has also reduced. It was this much, now it has reduced to this much. Now, if you look at the state level trends in poverty, this chart will help us understand it better. Now, here you will find two lines. This red line shows the poverty line in 2011-12, and the blue line above here shows poverty line in the year 1973-74. So now you can see that the poverty line has come down from here 55% to around 22%, let us say. And there has been a reduction in the poverty in different states. If you look at these states, Bihar and Madhya Pradesh, this is Odisha. Then we have Uttar Pradesh and West Bengal. These are all above this poverty line in the year 1973-74. You can very well see them above this line, right? Then in 2011-12, all the states have reduced their poverty. But still, 2011-12, the poverty line is at 22. And we can still find states like Bihar, then you have Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, and Uttar Pradesh still above the poverty line in the year 2011-12. Other states have considerably reduced their poverty. When you compare these states, we find that West Bengal and Tamil Nadu, they have reduced their poverty levels much better than the other states. Though the government claims a decline in the poverty levels, but economists raise doubts about the government's claims. The government claims that there has been a decline in the poverty levels on the basis of the higher rate of growth, agricultural production, employment in rural areas, etc., and the 1991 new economic policy. But there are doubts like how the data is being collected, and the items that are included in the consumption basket, and the number of poor are manipulated to arrive at the reduced figures of the number of poor in India. So that was about the poverty line and the estimates up till 2011-12.